Yossarian, a lead bombardier who had decided to live forever or die in the attempt. And his only mission each time he went up was to come down alive. To die or not to die, that was the question. And Clevinger grew limp trying to answer it. History did not demand Yossarian's premature demise. Justice could be satisfied without it. Progress did not hinge upon it. Victory did not depend upon it. That men would die was a matter of necessity. Which men would die, though, was a matter of circumstance. And Yossarian was willing to be the victim of anything but circumstance. But that was war. Just about all he could find in its favor was that it paid well, and it liberated children from the pernicious influence of their parents. Clevinger knew so much because Clevinger was a genius with a pounding heart and blanching face. He was a gangling, gawky, feverish, famish-eyed brain. As a Harvard undergraduate, he had won prizes and scholarship for just about everything. And the only reason he hadn't won prizes for everything else was he was too busy signing petitions, circulating petitions, and challenging petitions, joining discussion groups and resigning from discussion groups, attending youth congresses, picketing other youth congresses, and organizing student committees in defense of dismissed faculty members. Everyone agreed that Clevinger was certain to go far in the academic world. In short, Clevinger was one of those people with lots of intelligence and no brains. And everyone knew it except those who soon found it out. In short, he was a dope. He was a very serious, very earnest, and very conscientious dope. He knew everything about literature except how to enjoy it. Yossarian tried to help him. Don't be a dope, he had counseled Clevinger when they were both at cadet school. But Clevinger would not listen and found himself up on charges before the Action Board for conspiring to advocate the overthrow of the cadet officers Lieutenant Scheisskopf had appointed. Clevinger had a mind, and Lieutenant Scheisskopf had noticed that people with minds tended to get pretty smart at times. Such men were dangerous. The case against Clevinger was open and shut. The only thing missing was something to charge him with. The bloated colonel with the big fat mustache was chairman of the Action Board and began bellowing at Clevinger the moment Clevinger stepped into the room to plead innocent to the charges Lieutenant Scheisskopf had lodged against him. The colonel beat his fist down upon the table and hurt his hand, and became so further enraged with Clevinger that he beat his fist down upon the table even harder and hurt his hand some more. Lieutenant Scheisskopf glared at Clevinger with tight lips, mortified by the poor impression Clevinger was making. In 60 days you'll be fighting Billy Patrol, the colonel with the big fat mustache roared, and you think it's a big fat joke. I don't think it's a joke, sir, Clevinger replied. Don't interrupt. Yes, sir. And say sir when you do, ordered Major Metcalf. Yes, sir. Weren't you just ordered not to interrupt? Major Metcalf inquired coldly. But I didn't interrupt, sir, Clevinger protested. No, and you didn't say sir either. Add that to the charges against him, Major Metcalf directed the corporal who could take shorthand. Failure to say sir to superior officers when not interrupting them. Metcalf, said the colonel, you're a goddamn fool. Do you know that? Major Metcalf swallowed with difficulty. Yes, sir. Then keep your goddamn mouth shut. You don't make sense. There were 3 members of the Action Board, the bloated colonel with the big fat mustache, Lieutenant Scheisskopf, and Major Metcalf, who was trying to develop a steely gaze. As a member of the Action Board, Lieutenant Scheisskopf was one of the judges who would weigh the merits of the case against Clevinger as presented by the prosecutor. Lieutenant Scheisskopf was also the prosecutor. Clevinger had an officer defending him. The officer defending him was Lieutenant Scheisskopf. It was all very confusing to Clevinger. One day he had stumbled while marching to class. The next day he was formally charged with breaking ranks while in formation, felonious assault, indiscriminate behavior, mopery, high treason, provoking, being a smart guy, listening to classical music, and so on. In short, they threw the book at him. And there he was, standing in dread before the bloated colonel, who roared once more that in 60 days he would be fighting Billy Patrol, and had demanded to know how the hell he would like being washed out and shipped to the Solomon Islands to bury bodies. Clevinger replied that he would not like it. He was a dope who would rather be a corpse than bury one. "What did you mean," the colonel inquired slowly, "when you said we couldn't punish you?" "When, sir?" "I'm asking the questions. You're answering them." "Yes, sir, Did you think we brought you here to ask questions and for me to answer them?" "No, sir, What did we bring you here for?" "To answer questions." "You're goddamn right," roared the colonel. "Now suppose you start answering some before I break your goddamn head. Just what the hell did you mean, you bastard, when you said we couldn't punish you?" "I don't think I ever made that statement, sir." "Will you speak up, please?" "I couldn't hear you." "Yes, sir, Will you speak up, please?" He couldn't hear you. "Yes, sir, Metcalf, sir? Didn't I tell you to keep your stupid mouth shut?" "Yes, sir." "Then keep your stupid mouth shut when I tell you to keep your stupid mouth shut. Do you understand? Will you speak up, please? I couldn't hear you." "Yes, sir, Metcalf. Is that your foot I'm stepping on?" "No, sir, it must be Lieutenant Scheisskopf's foot." "It isn't my foot," said Lieutenant Scheisskopf. "Maybe it is my foot after all," said Major Metcalf. "Move it." "Yes, sir." "You'll have to move your foot first, Colonel. It's on top of mine." "Are you telling me to move my foot?" "No, sir." "Oh, no, sir." "Then move your foot and keep your stupid mouth shut." "Will you speak up, please? I still couldn't hear you." "Yes, sir. I said I didn't say you couldn't punish me." "Just what the hell are you talking about?" "I'm answering your question, sir." "What question?" "Just what the hell did you mean, you bastard, when you said we couldn't punish you?" said the corporal, who could take shorthand, reading from his steno pad. "All right," said the colonel. "Just what the hell did you mean?" "I didn't say you couldn't punish me, sir." "When?" "When what, sir?" "Now you're asking me questions again." "I'm sorry, sir. I'm afraid I don't understand your question." "When didn't you say we couldn't punish you?" "Don't you understand my question?" "No, sir, I don't understand. You just told us that. Now suppose you answer my question." "But how can I answer it?" "That's another question you're asking me. I'm sorry, sir. I don't know how to answer it. I never said you couldn't punish me." "Now you're telling us when you did say it. I'm asking you to tell us when you didn't say it." Clevinger took a deep breath. "I always didn't say you couldn't punish me, sir." "That's much better, Mr. Clevinger, even though it is a barefaced lie. Last night in the latrine, didn't you whisper that we couldn't punish you to that other dirty son of a bitch we don't like? What's his name?" "Yossarian, sir," said Lieutenant Scheisskopf. "Yeah, Yossarian. That's right, Yossarian." "Yossarian? Is that his name, Yossarian? What the hell kind of a name is Yossarian?" Lieutenant Scheisskopf had the facts at his fingertips. "It's Yossarian's name, sir," he explained. "Yes, I suppose it is. Didn't you whisper to Yossarian we couldn't punish you?" "Oh, no, sir. I whispered to him that you couldn't find me guilty. I may be stupid," interrupted the colonel, "but the distinction escapes me. I guess I am pretty stupid because the distinction escapes me. What? You're a windy son of a bitch, aren't you? Nobody asked you for clarification, and you're giving me clarification. I was making a statement, not asking for clarification. You are a windy son of a bitch, aren't you?" "No, sir." "No, sir? Are you calling me a goddamn liar?" "Oh, no, sir." "Then you're a windy son of a bitch, aren't you?" "No, sir." "Are you trying to pick a fight with me?" "No, sir." "Are you a windy son of a bitch?" "No, sir." "God damn it, you are trying to pick a fight with me. For 2 stinking cents, I'd jump over this big fat table and rip your stinking cowardly body apart limb from limb." Do it, cried Major Metcalf. "Metcalf, you stinking son of a bitch, didn't I tell you to keep your stinking, cowardly, stupid mouth shut?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir." "Then suppose you do it." "I was only trying to learn, sir." "The only way a person can learn is by trying." "Who says so?" Everybody says so, sir. Even Lieutenant Scheisskopf says so." "Do you say so?" "Yes, sir," said Lieutenant Scheisskopf, "but everybody says so." Well, Metcalf, suppose you try keeping that stupid mouth of yours shut, and maybe that's the way you learn how. Now, where were we? Read me back the last line. Read me back the last line, read back the corporal who could take short air. Not my last line, stupid, the colonel shouted. Somebody else's. Read me back the last line, read back the corporal. That's my last line again, shrieked the colonel, turning purple with anger. Oh, no, sir, corrected the corporal. That's my last line. I read it to you just a moment ago. Don't you remember, sir? It was only a moment ago. Oh, my God. Read me back his last line, stupid. Say, what the hell's your name, anyway? Popinjay, sir. Well, you're next, Popinjay. As soon as his trial ends, your trial begins. Get it? Yes, sir. What will I be charged with? What the hell difference does that make? Did you hear what he asked me? You're going to learn, Popinjay. The minute we finish with Clevinger, you're going to learn. Cadet Clevinger, what did... You are Cadet Clevinger, aren't you? And not Popinjay? Yes, sir. Good. What did... I'm Popinjay, sir. Popinjay. Is your father a millionaire or a member of the Senate? No, sir. Then you're up shit creek, Popinjay, without a paddle. He's not a general or a high-ranking member of the administration, is he? No, sir. That's good. What does your father do? He's dead, sir. Oh, that's very good. You really are up the creek, Popinjay. Is Popinjay really your name? Just what the hell kind of a name is Popinjay, anyway? I don't like it. It's Popinjay's name, sir, Lieutenant Scheisskopf explained. Well, I don't like it, Popinjay, and I just can't wait to rip your stinking, cowardly body apart limb from limb. Cadet Clevinger, will you please repeat what the hell it was you did or didn't whisper to Yossarian late last night in the latrine? Yes, sir. I said you couldn't find me guilty. We'll take it from there. Precisely what did you mean, Cadet Clevinger, when you said we could not find you guilty? I didn't say you couldn't find me guilty, sir. When? When what, sir? God damn it, are you going to start pumping me again? No, sir, I'm sorry, sir. Then answer the question. When didn't you say we couldn't find you guilty? Late last night in the latrine, sir. Is that the only time you didn't say it? No, sir. I always didn't say you couldn't find me guilty, sir. What I did say to Yossarian was, nobody asked you what you did say to Yossarian. We asked you what you didn't say to him. We're not at all interested in what you did say to Yossarian. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Then we'll go on. What did you say to Yossarian? I said to him, sir, that you couldn't find me guilty of the offense with which I am charged, and still be faithful to the cause of what? You're mumbling. Stop mumbling. Yes, sir. And mumble, sir, when you do. Metcalf, you bastard. Yes, sir, mumbled Clevinger. Justice, sir. That you couldn't find. Justice? The colonel was astounded. What is justice? Justice, sir. That's not what justice is, the colonel jeered and began pounding the table again with his big fat hand. That's what Karl Marx is. I'll tell you what justice is. Justice is a knee in the gut from the floor on the chin at night sneaky, with a knife brought up down on the magazine of a battleship sandbagged, underhanded in the dark, without a word of warning. Garroting. That's what justice is when we've all got to be tough enough and rough enough to fight Billy Patrol. From the hip. Get it? No, sir. Don't sir me. Yes, sir. And say sir when you don't, ordered Major Metcalf. Clevinger was guilty, of course, or he would not have been accused. And since the only way to prove it was to find him guilty, it was their patriotic duty to do so. It was all very confusing to Clevinger. They would have lynched him if they could. They were 3 grown men, and he was a boy, and they hated him and wished him dead. Yossarian had done his best to warn him the night before. You haven't got a chance, kid, he had told him glumly. They hate Jews. I'm not Jewish, answered Clevinger. That will make no difference, Yossarian promised. They're after everybody. Clevinger recoiled from their hatred as though from a blinding light. These 3 men spoke his language and wore his uniform. But Clevinger understood now that nowhere in the world were there men who hated him more. Yossarian asked ex-PFC Wintergreen, the influential mail clerk at headquarters, couldn't you forge some official orders on that mimeograph machine of yours and get us out of flying to Bologna? XPFC Wintergreen pulled away slowly with a look of scorn. Sure I could, he explained with pride, but I would never dream of doing anything like that. Why not? Because it's your job. We all have our jobs to do. My job is to unload these Zippo lighters at a profit if I can and pick up some cotton from Milo. Your job is to bomb the ammunition dumps at Bologna. But I'm going to be killed at Bologna, Yossarian pleaded. We're all going to be killed. Then you'll just have to be killed, replied XPFC Wintergreen. Why can't you be a fatalist about it the way I am? If I'm destined to unload these lighters at a profit and pick up some Egyptian cotton cheap from Milo, then that's what I'm going to do. And if you own you, then you're going to be killed, so you might just as well go out and die like a man. I hate to say this, Yossarian, but you're turning into a chronic complainer. Clevinger agreed with XPFC Wintergreen that it was Yossarian's job to get killed over Bologna. You know very well that I don't approve of Colonel Cathcart any more than you do. Clevinger paused for emphasis, his mouth quivering, then beat his fist down softly against the sleeping bag. But it's not for us to determine what targets must be destroyed, or who's to destroy them, or who's to get killed doing it, interrupted Yossarian. And why? Yes, even that. We have no right to question. You're insane. No right to question. Do you really mean that it's not my business how or why I get killed, and that it is Colonel Cathcart's? Do you really mean that? Yes, I do, Clevinger insisted, seeming unsure. There are men entrusted with winning the war who are in a much better position than we are to decide what targets have to be bombed. We're talking about two different things, Yossarian answered with exaggerated weariness. You are talking about the relationship of the Air Corps to the infantry, and I am talking about the relationship of me to Colonel Cathcart. You are talking about winning the war, and I am talking about winning the war and keeping alive. Exactly, Clevinger snapped smugly. And which do you think is more important? To whom? Yossarian shot back. Open your eyes, Clevinger. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference who wins the war to someone who's dead. Clevinger sat for a moment as though he'd been slapped. Congratulations, he exclaimed bitterly. I can't think of another attitude that could be depended upon to give greater comfort to the enemy. The enemy, retorted Yossarian, is anybody who's going to get you killed, no matter which side he's on. And that includes Colonel Cathcart. And don't you forget that, because the longer you remember it, the longer you might live. And Yossarian knew he was right, because, to the best of his knowledge, he had never been wrong. Everywhere he looked was a nut, and he knew his life was in peril. Major had had a difficult time from the start. Like Minovichevi, he had been born too late. Major had been born too late and too mediocre. Some men achieve mediocrity, and some men have mediocrity thrust upon them. With Major, it had been all three. Even among men lacking all distinction, he inevitably stood out as a man like the rest. And people who met him were always impressed by how unimpressive he was. Major was polite to his elders, who disliked him. Whatever his elders told him to do, he did. They told him to look before he leaped, and he always looked before he leaped. They told him never to put off until the next day what he could do the day before, and he never did. He was told to honor his father and his mother, and he honored his father and his mother. He was told that he should not kill, and he did not kill until he got into the army. Then he was told to kill, and he killed. He turned the other cheek on every occasion, and always did unto others exactly as he would have had others do unto him. When he gave to charity, his left hand never knew what his right hand was doing. He never once took the name of the Lord his God in vain, committed adultery, or coveted his neighbor's ass. In fact, he loved his neighbor and never even bore false witness against him. Major's elders disliked him because he was such a flagrant nonconformist. Because Major needed a friend so desperately, he never found one. Major's father, on the other hand, was a sober, God-fearing man whose idea of a good joke was to lie. He was a long-limbed farmer, a freedom-loving, law-abiding, rugged individualist who held that federal aid to anyone but farmers was creeping socialism. He had a Calvinist faith in predestination and could perceive how everyone's misfortunes but his own were expressions of God's will. His specialty was alfalfa, and he made a good thing out of not growing any. The government paid him well for every bushel of alfalfa he did not grow. The more alfalfa he did not grow, the more money the government gave him. And he spent every penny he did not earn on new land to increase the amount of alfalfa he did not produce. Major's father worked without rest at not growing alfalfa. On long winter evenings he remained indoors and did not mend harness. And he sprang out of bed at the crack of noon every day, just to make certain the chores would not be done. He invested in land wisely, and soon was not growing more alfalfa than any other man in the county. Neighbors sought him out for advice on all subjects, for he had made much money and was therefore deemed wise. As ye sow, so shall ye reap, he counseled, and everyone said, Amen. Major found Yossarian blocking his path. Captain Yossarian requests permission to speak to the Major at once about a matter of life or death. Permission denied, Major snapped. That won't do it, Major. Major gave in. All right, he conceded. Jump inside my office. After you, sir. They jumped inside the office. Major sat down, and Yossarian moved around in front of the desk and told him he didn't want to fly any more combat missions. What could he do, Major asked himself. All he could do was what he had been instructed to do, and hope for the best. Why not, he asked. I'm afraid. That's nothing to be ashamed of, Major counseled him. We're all afraid. I'm not ashamed, Yossarian explained. I'm just afraid. You wouldn't be normal if you were never afraid. Even the bravest men experience fear. One of the biggest jobs we all face in combat is to overcome our fear. Oh, come on, Major. Can't we do without that horse shit? Major lowered his gaze sheepishly and fiddled with his fingers. What do you want me to tell you? That I've flown enough missions and can go home. How many have you flown? 51. You've only got 4 more to fly. He'll raise them. Every time I get close, Colonel Cathcart raises them. Colonel Cathcart is our commanding officer, and we must obey him. Why don't you fly the 4 more missions and see what happens? I don't want to. What could you do? Major asked himself again. What could you do with a man who looked you squarely in the eye and said he would rather die than be killed in combat? A man who was at least as mature and intelligent as you were, and who you had to pretend was not. What could you say to him? Suppose everybody on our side felt that way. Then I'd certainly be a damned fool to feel any other way, wouldn't I? What could you possibly say to him, Major wondered. One thing he could not say was that there was nothing he could do. To say there was nothing he could do would suggest he would do something if he could, and imply the existence of an error or injustice. He must never say there was nothing he could do. I'm sorry 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 he could do. Doc Daneeka, the squadron flight surgeon, shook his melancholy head and refused to ground Yossarian. You think you've got troubles? Doc Daneeka rebuked him grievingly. What about me? I lived on peanuts for 8 years while I learned how to be a doctor. Then, just as the shop was finally starting to show a big profit, they drafted me. I don't know what you're complaining about. Doc Daneeka was Yossarian's friend and would do just about nothing in his power to help him. Oh, I'm not complaining, he complained. I know there's a war going on. I know a lot of people are going to have to suffer for us to win it. But why must I be one of them? Why don't they draft some of these old doctors who keep shooting their kisses off in public about what big sacrifices the medical game stands ready to make? I don't want to make sacrifices. I want to make dough. Actually, he was a very warm, compassionate man who never stopped feeling sorry for himself. You're wasting your time, Doc Daneeka was forced to tell him. Can't you ground someone who's crazy, asked Yossarian. Oh, sure, I have to. There's a rule saying I have to ground anyone who's crazy. Then why don't you ground me? I'm crazy. Ask Clevinger. Clevinger? Where's Clevinger? You find Clevinger, I'll ask him. Then ask any of the others. They'll tell you how crazy I am. They're crazy. Then why don't you ground them? Why don't they ask me to? Because they're crazy, that's why. Of course they're crazy, Doc Daneeka replied. I just told you they're crazy, didn't I? And you can't let crazy people decide whether you're crazy or not, can you? Yossarian tried another approach. Is Orr crazy? He sure is. Can you ground him? I sure can. But first he has to ask me to. That's part of the rule. And why doesn't he ask you to? Because he's crazy. He has to be crazy to keep flying combat missions after all the close calls he's had. Sure, I can ground Orr, but first he has to ask me. That's all he has to do to be grounded? That's all. Let him ask me. And then you can ground him? Oh, no. Then I can't ground him. You mean there's a catch? Sure there's a catch, Doc Daneeka replied. Catch 22. Anyone who wants to get out of combat duty isn't really crazy. There was only one catch, and that was catch 22, which specified that a concern for one's own safety in the face of dangers that were real and immediate was the process of a rational mind. Orr was crazy and could be grounded. All he had to do was ask. And as soon as he did, he would no longer be crazy and would have to fly more missions. Orr would be crazy to fly more missions, and sane if he didn't. But if he was sane, he had to fly them. If he flew them, he was crazy and didn't have to. If he didn't want to, he was sane and had to. Yossarian was moved very deeply by the absolute simplicity of this clause of Catch 22 and let out a respectful whistle. That's some catch, that Catch 22, he observed. It's the best there is, Doc Daneeka agreed.